People hear me talk about changing the relationship between commercial software and national security. That's why I get out of bed. That's what gets us up. And every time we get a little bit further, I think in our head, it's not like, hey, it's working or this could actually work. It's, holy shit, we can do more. We're thinking too small. Like, we can have a generational impact on national security if we get this right.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Second Front Systems is a public benefit corporation that helps deploy commercial software for national security benefit. The company's product is called Game Warden, and it helps continuously accredit and deploy software. It's a process that previously took months, if not years, costing teams time, money, and mission impact. The company's CEO is Tyler Sweatt, a former Army officer and West Point grad whose mission has long been to find new ways to help America win. In addition to leading Second Front, Tyler is the host of the All Quiet on the Second Front podcast, and he's a prolific member of the defense tech community. In this episode, we mixed it up a little bit. In addition to talking technology transition, we talk about the human transition and the cultural differences between the Department of Defense and industry, as well as companies of different sizes. Hope you enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's a face you've probably never seen before in the defense tech world. We've got Tyler Sweatt, the CEO of Second Front Systems and the host of All Quiet on the Second Front podcast. We're turning the camera around, we're turning the mic around, we're turning the chairs around. Tyler's in the hot seat today. Hey man, thanks for being with us.
Dude, I relish the opportunity to get on the other side of the table and sort of feel what everyone else feels. But,
the other half lives over here, exactly.
That's right. Also, couldn't pass up an opportunity to get to rip it up a little bit with you, brother. I think one of my favorite people in the game. We don't get to see each other enough, so thanks for the opportunity and having me on.
Thanks, man. That's you're kind, and the feeling is mutual. This will be fun. We're gonna do it a little differently. I mean, Tyler, a lot of folks are familiar with your story. I will say our listeners are a bit different. We got a lot of people who are just entering the industry for the first time, who are, deep maybe on the commercial space. They're giving defense a look. They're seeing the YC news. They're hearing the hype. They're reading the Twitter feeds. They're popping zins out in Gundo. They're like, what the hell's going on in this industry? So I think your story is a really unique one. You've been in uniform. You've done some amazing things for the country on both sectors. Give us a little bit of the background of how Tyler the gunner ends up leading a software company in the defense world.
Yeah, I'll say it's proof that anything's possible. Started in the Army. Most of the time was just Afghanistan and back, sort of on repeat, right? So grew up in Jersey, economics major in college, so didn't really know about the tech industry. I didn't have a computer until junior year in high school. So when they asked me at West Point if I wanted to major in IT, I was like, what do nerds do with computers? Go outside and throw a ball or shoot something. In hindsight, that was a little bit of a mistake. Transitioned out of the Army and admittedly wasn't sure what I wanted to do long term. Knew I wanted to work on hard problems, things that had impact. Was fortunate to find my way to a consulting firm that sort of was like a think tank and a consulting firm kind of mashed together. And they said, hey, if you go sell a piece of work, you can run it and sort of build a team around it, and you can start stitching that together. You know me well enough that if you half give me approval or just don't tell me no, I'm going to take it as approval and just run with it. So I ran with it and was fortunate to be able to support a whole bunch of really interesting national security problems, and then a whole bunch of commercial, emerging technology and regulated industry problems. So working with corp dev offices and councils and product teams on how do we think about tech introduction and injection? How do we think about mitigating adversarial or competitive issues from it? I was trying to figure out, year 6, year 7, hey, I got to get earlier. We got to get to the startup. We got to get to the two, 3 guys in the garage, made the joke, the Patagonia vest that's yeeting an investment out. We got to get out of boardrooms there. I couldn't figure out how. Wasn't from the community. So a couple buddies, I was like, hey, I'm going to start my own consulting firm, and like I'm going to help defense and ventures all come together. And a couple buddies believed in me and were like, cool, like, here's a little bit of like risk capital just so, you can pay your mortgage. Did that for less than a year, picked up a bunch of capital allocator and sort of early stage company customers. One of them acquired us and sort of bolted us in as their national security arm. All of a sudden I was a startup guy, and 3.5 years ago, came over to Second Front, knew Peter and the founding team through the industry. I don't think anybody doesn't know Peter. And timing worked out after they'd done their seed round. Enrique and I both came over at the same time. And as they say, the rest is history.
So just for a little who's who in the zoo. So Peter Dixon, the founder of Second Front. A lot of folks know him, currently running for Congress in California.
Yep. California 16, if you're out there, vote. So
California 16. So as somebody who's done a detour in politics, God bless him. Good luck.
He's a glutton for punishment.
I don't generally wish politics on my worst enemies, but somebody's got to do it. We need good people to step into the arena.
Amen.
So good on him. So that's Peter, and then Enrique Odi, had a unique perspective and position at something called Kessel Run. Tell us a little bit about Kessel Run and how that experience informs what you guys are working on today.
Yeah. So Enrique, God, I've heard his story enough that I think I can tell it almost as good as he does. Cyber warfare officer, Chinese foreign area officer. Spent the first 15 years of his career doing like a bunch of cool guy cyber and intel work. Ended up at some crazy experiment at the time called DIUX. Was the Air Force team lead there and sort of like OG, I don't know what number, some small number, early employee there. And then they came up with an idea that, hey, needed to roll sort of an Air Force software factory to work AOC problems. Became Kessel Run. I don't know if I know like the genealogy well enough to say it was the first of its kind. I believe it was the first. It's the most well-known and
most successful of its kind. Yeah.
Yeah. And it like became its own thing where we had airmen coding and, sitting next to private sector software companies, slinging code, rolling applications into production for real world problems, supporting mission. So Enrique sort of sat at that intersection of like real entrenched PO sort of, traditional sort of defense and super hyper early stage innovation. But that intersection resulted in capability into production, which was like the super interesting part of all of it for me.
Absolutely. So AOC, Air Operations Center, kind of the heart of the not just the air war, but in many ways logistics and just moving things and people and conducting operations all over the world. It's an incredible story. We'll drop some stuff in the show notes. If you haven't heard of Kessel Run, it's probably the fundamental kind of innovation to understand in software delivery in the military in the last, I don't know, decade or so. Maybe I'm overstating it a bit, but probably not much. I think
it'll make Enrique smile.
The target you guys though are after, derivative of that experience. I think it's actually fitting, Tyler, that we're starting with people. You, Enrique, some of these other folks, because this show, Crossing the Valley, we talk about tech transition a lot. We talk about the getting capability from the lab to the warfighter. Fundamentally, that's a people problem, and there's another piece of that transition, which is human transition. It's people moving from industry into government, from government to industry, from big to small company, all over the place. Today we're recording, end of February. Some big news today on the people front. It might be about a week or two behind by the time this airs, but news this morning that the Defense Ventures Fellowship, a program that's really been kind of right at the core of human capital innovation and human capital transition for the last number of years, is no more.
Yeah.
Tyler, I'm curious for your reaction as you saw that news.
Yeah. I mean, one, like, your heart aches for not just folks that were looking forward to like the next iteration of the fellowship and we're going to be fellows with Mike and JR and Patty and the team, who'd been doing seemingly sometimes some thankless work on right? Because there's the, hey, we're helping to transition and we're creating this experience. There's also this, maybe it's secondary or tertiary, but I think probably the most outsized value is we're building empathy in different constituencies for how things work. Because more often than not, when you hear these different communities sort of shrieking at each other, there's a lack of empathy and sort of understanding on like what is the reality, what is that like point of departure that other human is coming to the scenario, to the conversation with. And I think DVP did a great job, bringing folks back and forth. And there's all of this knowledge transfer that's then flowing. And then all of a sudden now you're starting to build new cultural artifacts in these entrenched organizations or constituencies, which starts to then, you get into like tribal ontology. You start building an actual network of networks, which is what the country needs.
It's super well said. And I'm sure we're going to come back to it as we talk about how you actually go through the process of getting capability from the folks who develop it to the folks who use it. But I'm just struck when you look at the names on that list, as you look through the folks who have gone through that program in the last few years. It's just some of the absolute killers of the industry, the best people that and people who have changed companies, and not only serve the mission on the inside, but change companies on the outside. So
absolutely,
I think that without a doubt, that network is one that folks would be wise to tap into. And I have no doubt that some this is not the last we've heard of that program.
Yeah, I suspect you're right there. I think this is it'll feel like the end of days today, but it's too important of a program and a capability and initiative to let fall to the wayside.
Absolutely. Tyler, let's spend a little time. I want to dive into Second Front because you guys you're different. It's a different business model, and you're solving you're solving problems on both sides of the divide, both for companies and for the government. So for those of us who are coming to this maybe for the first time, lay out for us what is the problem Second Front exists to solve, and how are you guys doing
it? Good question. I relish the opportunity to talk about sort of what we do and why. I think the best way for me to explain this is like when you think about delivering commercial software or rolling a software application into the national security community. So think, I want this on like an approved secure network, right? Secret network A or, network code name B. That process can take 18 months, 24 months. That process can take millions of dollars for that fixed version of the application, right? Then I want to go back and recycle, and I'm talking multiple months per update. If you think about that just in one application, commercially to one application in the national security, if I'm 18 months off where the baseline is, so I've now got some variance that way. I then start rolling updates and I'm increasing the variance even more. I then start adding new applications in there. And now I've got, hundreds of baselines of the same application rolling in all of these different environments. It's a nightmare for the government. It ends up costing them way more in hard dollars and just like manpower and managed because they're doing self-hosted, self-managed. For the ISVs, for software companies, you're rolling through the same compliance hurdles over and over and over again. I equate it often to if I was taking a road trip from Virginia to California, and every time I crossed county and state line, I had to go into an inspection shop and get re-inspected. Now, it was the same standards for the inspection, but it was a different person, and they had a slightly different interpretation of like what it meant for my windshield to be clean or my seatbelt to be functioning. And instead of it taking, I don't know how long it takes to drive across the country, 4 days, it took me 75 days. But I had like 800 stickers that I met the standards. That's what it's like trying to bring software into the department. We exist to solve that problem, right? We want to make it predictable and transparent and structured for how you come in. We want to give national security end users a backbone of trust that they can know, hey, if it's rolling on Game Warden, it's our platform, we know that it meets the standards. We can see the evidence of it. It's the same way when you open up your phone and you're like, yeah, hey, I'll download this app in the App Store. You know you trust it. It's running on the iOS. It meets all the standards. somebody on the side of the street hands you a QR code and says, download this application. It's the greatest thing in the world. You're not downloading it. So we're sort of rolling a lack of a better term, an OS for national security. And different business models. We're a public benefit corporation. So our mission is to accelerate the transition of technology to the national security community. What that means is from a create and return value to shareholder standpoint, your normal corporate sort of canon, mission for us is equal with that. So I can look at my board, I can look at my investors, and we don't make decisions just on shareholder value creation and return. We make it on mission and shareholder value. They are both equal. And we take that very, very seriously.
Some listeners, if you've tuned into other episodes, you'll have heard about things like FedRAMP. You'll have heard of things like National Institute for Standards and Testing, ISO, CMMC, some of these hurdles that especially folks from the outside, if you've had commercial success and then you're exploring the federal market, that you have to overcome before you're ready to really do business at scale. And you guys are vectored right at that problem, which is how do we help great builders, great technologists, great capability get into the hands of the people who need it faster? I'm not sure there's a more important problem. I mean, there may be one. I'm not sure what it is. So you guys are right at the core of it. And you attacked it, I think, interestingly. This is an insider team, right? Yourself, Peter, Enrique. You guys are not newcomers to the space. This is an insider's insight of people who understand how that process has happened inside DoD over the last decade plus. So talk to us, Tyler, about the initial go-to-market strategy. How did you guys think about it? Was this like commercial first? Was this government first? Cyberlandia? Like, what were you guys thinking on day
one? Everybody thought we were nuts on day one. Remember sitting down with Enrique and was like, God, are we gonna be able to do this? And I'll say, like, the core, it was an absolutely sort of like insider, to use your word, folks who sort of sat on different sides of the table and had experience from, and it was still friggin' almost impossible to do. So I don't know what that says about like the department, its relationship with technology.
The good news is you're doing it. You're doing it.
we're getting there. Yeah, we're chopping some wood. There's a lot more to go. From a go-to-market standpoint, right, the hypothesis out of the gate was, hey, we did a bunch of research on like time and how much does it cost? What does total cost of ownership look like? And when we got down to, hey, what we're seeing on average is well over 1.5 and well over 18 months. We were like, great, we're going to try to slash that down to like weeks and like the cost of an FTE or two. And like we're trying to find the right business model that took time to value and total cost of ownership and just completely flipped the paradigm when you think about PubSec. And so we're selling those licenses commercially, and commercial companies will use us as their sort of deployment pipelines and secure hosting, which then lets them go sell their licenses directly to the government and lets the government come directly to them. We will run environments for the government if they want us to. They buy licenses for certain applications they want to use. We try to go straight B2B, standard sort of purchase orders. We don't sit in the middle of transactions between sort of our customers and their government contracts. There's no points on your growth or anything. So we went for hyper transparency, super predictability, and went that way. Like I said, it was a little uphill. I think the first year everyone was like, hey, that's interesting. Like, it'd be pretty neat if it was true. And so a lot of the first year was for those of you who don't know TJ, who runs go-to-market over our team, it was TJ, me, and Enrique kind of had backpacks on and we're just on a plane, and it was a lot of sitting across the table from people and like making eye contact and shaking hands and saying, listen, like, this is a wicked problem. We're gonna figure it out. How do we get you to kind of click I believe? And then once we started to get a little bit of traction, it allowed us to bring all of the government folks that sort of sit behind us, either contracts or R&D agreements or whatever, and bring everybody to the table. It's like, all right, how's everybody getting value out of this? What does this look like? And trying to create all of these scenarios where in like the most radically transparent way possible, all boats are rising. And I think that has allowed us to really start to push the envelope on what's possible and how fast and with what degrees of stability and transparency we can be just accelerating delivery and removing inefficiencies out of the market so that a dollar from defense goes further, that a man hour or a line of code or whatever goes faster, and ultimately capability creates effects in the community, which is what we're looking for.
Love that. Give us make it concrete for people. What was the moment where you guys looked at each other and said, this might actually be working?
Look, I tell everybody, right? You are not at a startup if in the same week you're not looking at somebody being like, holy shit, this is going to work. We're going to ring the bell. And then, the next day you're crying in the shower being like, my God, I made a mistake. Like, how are we paying for chow next week? So take that, like use that context. There were a couple times where, like the first app we were able to deploy and we were like, cool, we validated the concept. We've taken like a dirty commercial application, not built for Gov, and it's now up and running, .mil domain, getting consumed, driving change in DoD. I think that was a big one. There's been a couple like pretty interesting use cases that sort of trend into the classified side of the house where it's got like an operational impact, which I think was really, really interesting. Fulfilling on a personal level, but I think continued sort of proof that, hey, there is so much change that we can go drive and so much value, like mission impact, market making, right? Like, people hear me talk about changing the relationship between commercial software and national security, right? Like, that's why I get out of bed. That's what gets us up. And every time we get a little bit further, I think in our head, it's not like, hey, it's working or this could actually work. It's, holy shit, we can do more. We're thinking too small. Like, we can have a generational impact on national security if we get this right.
I love that. It sounds like not a foot out. That's not one step at a time out of bed. That's a jump.
Hell yeah, brother.
So love that, man. Good for you guys. One question that comes to mind is, as you talked a little bit about Kessel Run up front. Like, I think there's two sides to this, right? On one hand, what do you think has made you guys aren't the first to try to tackle some piece of this, whether it's from the inside, things like Platform One or Kessel Run, all domain common platform. Like, there have been attempts to try to get software to kind of all deploy into this kind of environment that makes it all quick, fast, easy, or good, fast, cheap, whatever you want to call it, without necessarily going after the others. What do you think has allowed you guys to gain traction here where maybe others were?
Yeah, I think, like, first I'll say, like, traction I think is relative. Right. I think like our traction looks different because we're a private company. Right. Like, I could easily turn around and be like, hey, P1's running like 150,000 workloads right now. Like, that's freaking traction. Like, that's awesome. It might be obfuscated by mission reality or mission requirement. So I'm going to frame that where I think there's that aspect. And then the way in which each org operates. Right, like, no matter how good, and I'll use KR as an example. Like, I talk to Enrique about this all the time. Like, no matter how good or successful, you're still limited by the system you are working in. Right, so we're on like another potentially 3 months of CR. Like, Congress is, we're at the flinging poo at each other phase of the budgeting process.
Deal today, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, huge if true. I heard one last week. Yeah, but my point being, like, you're on a CR, you're on no new starts, you're on no increase. How do you run a scaling software organization that? So I don't think it's a limitation of like capability or vision or intent at like your KRs or your P1s or anywhere. I think there's a bigger, like, what does this whole community look like? And there should be multiple pathways, right? Like, Mo ways for Mo apps is Mo beta. And look, for part of it, any startup, like 33, Greg Bunch used to say it, at some venture class he taught at Boost, like, no matter how good you are or anything, about a third of your outcome is just going to be luck based. So right place, right time, you had the rise of folks like Enrique and some of the more digitally native folks moving into senior positions, either in government or industry. You had a more digitally native congressional sort of staff. You had things like, Russia and Ukraine and folks seeing what the power of software down at like the lowest tactical level could do. I think you sort of put all of that together, and I would love to say it was like strategic genius, but we were sort of like fishing and just happened to be in the right spot. And then,
hey man, no,
what do you do with it after?
We're not letting you off that easy. Great leaders make their own luck and put the team into place to be successful when the timing is right. And I think you guys are absolutely in the right place at the right time, and crucially, like, have the execution capacity to get it done. That's the big.
I mean, that's. I was just gonna say. I mean, it's the what do you do when you catch? How do you not be Ahab, right? Like, nobody wants to catch the whale and die at the end. So. Yep.
Dog catches bus. Now
that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Yep. No, I think that's right. I think that's fair. It talks a little bit about, like, so how do you guys talk about transition internally, right? Because commercial first, got it. You sell into companies. But you guys have also gone down the SBIR path. There's small business innovation research, done early deals. You have phase 3s in place with the government. Yep. So just like help us understand, what's the federal side of this look like versus the direct to company piece?
Yeah, I mean, federal's a mix of, IDIQs that are like phase 3s down to some OTAs to CRADAs to sort of everything in between.
Diverse portfolio.
Yeah, but it's a super diverse, and for us, it's about, hey, like, what do we need to have in place to, one, have the like resiliency to make sure that we can make mission and we can deliver the promise sort of we're making to our customers and their users, right? So when I say customer, more often than not, I'm talking about this commercial software company, the application developer, but their user, that national security user, is my customer's customer, right? And that's where effect gets created. So we've got this like interesting sort of persona mapping that is, I think, way more extensive and diverse than a lot of places, for better and worse. It's a little overwhelming at times. But as we're looking at our relationship with the government, it's designed to ensure that we can be the lever for software to go drive change. That can look like 100 different things. And it's about, what do we need that config to be? So like, we don't look at the government as hey, I want to be like the next software prime, or I need a contract this big or that big. Like, I am equally happy with $0 contracts and $100 million IDIQs. And I will ask a bunch of clarifying questions that are exactly the same about either. What I will say is, like, the sales motion is really different. So you've got to be thoughtful on like, what does like enablement or operationalization look like on those two sales cycles? We have it down by like segment, and then we have like a bifurcated public sector side. Just because timing, process, like sequence, all of that is different. So being thoughtful about that as you both are young and you're early, because you can run into a thing where you feel good because some like deputy director somewhere or some major somewhere was like, this thing's the shit. We need this. You go home, you high five yourself. Let's go. And then you realize that there's like 900 other things that have to happen before you get there. So understanding that buying process and like users and buyers and who they are. And AppWorks does a great job explaining a lot of this. Who they are, who they aren't, how it works, how it doesn't work. The same way you understand your buyer personas, your users, all of that on the commercial side. And then you've got to kind of have an overlay on what that looks like. And then you can start to think about, like, what do you resource? What do you not resource? What do you prioritize? What do you not prioritize? Because going after everything's a fool's errand. You'll miss it all.
Spread yourself too thin.
Correct.
I mean, if you fast forward a couple of years, though, if you project out, like, is this a 50-50 business? Is half of your business coming from federal and commercial? Or are you guys
we have that
dominated
debate.
by commercial?
We have that debate all the time. I mean, we have tried to be really intentional about, like, even density to make sure that, like, nobody's got the ability to, like, hard influence what we're building, how we're building, why we're building, right? Like, we use private capital. We've got our own products. We've got our own, like, the whole process. I mean, I think there's a world, right? I don't want to say never. I think it is, we are able to create lever because of our, like, 85-50, like, whatever the split is now, 80-20, 70-30, whatever it is. We're able to create lever on that right now that I would say, as long as I have the lever and the revenue is the right type of revenue, sure, right? It could be 50-50. I don't think it'll ever break that. But absent that, right, the way we buffer in to make sure that we can preserve the lever is by being intentional about structure.
Say a little bit more about that.
So if we're in a spot where, like, our lifeblood is dependent purely on government contracts and government funding and, like, things showing up on time, anyone who's worked with the government knows, like yes, they bill themselves as a great customer. Dude, it's freaking hard to even invoice the government, right? Like, the freaking system doesn't work. You know, anyone who's been in the military remembers, like, DTS when they were trying to travel. It's like DTS for invoices. Your stuff gets kicked back. You've got some, like, poor financial analyst who's like, what the hell? You know, you're out, whatever, $100,000, $200,000, which start to think about the compounding impact of that, you know, as you're larger. I want our lifeblood to be driven by high velocity commercial software licenses, private capital, things where we're not slowing things down or having to pivot or reconfigure models because we're not sure if it's going to comport to, like, a contract requirement.
Yeah.
I want to be able to say, this is the best lever we can provide global national security and defense, period. Here's how we fund that and set the business up. Okay, now I've got, you know, the ability to sort of, like, modulate how we interact with the government. In my head, it gives them way more flexibility. It allows us to sort of meet them where they are. And again, if we're living the sort of mission of, like, I want to rip inefficiency out of the market, like, I don't want the government paying me. Right? I don't want the government paying for capability. I don't want the government paying for piping.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the incentives piece, I think, is what it comes back to again and again. I think from a taxpayer perspective, I love what you're saying, right? Which is like, my dollars to Uncle Sam should be delivering effects where they need to be delivering impact.
Yeah.
Now, look, if I would pay you guys a quarter of that to make sure that they can deliver it, you know, in this decade, I think that's worth it. But, you know, at the same time, like, you're talking about the poor financial analyst or this person. We're giving these people crap processes, tough policies. Yep. We're not equipping them with the right tools, training, education, and frankly, support and mentorship in a lot of cases. But it doesn't mean that any individual person in that system is a bad person. You and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. Is, you know, the incentives are just so different. I mean, you've been on both sides of this. You've been in the government. You've been in the belly of the beast. Now you're operating at the highest levels of the startup community. Like, what is that cultural shock or that cultural difference between big DoD, small startup? Like, how does any company do business when you have such misaligned kind of cultures and incentives?
So, God, I mean, that's the thesis level question, right? Like, that's the $1 billion question. But so the challenge is also this. Like, started this way. Right, when we talk about DoD, we talk about DoD like it's a single entity. It's a single buyer, it's a single customer. In reality, it's like 800 different, like, really diverse entities, right? With, like, their own cultural sort of norms and artifacts, their own processes, their own procedures. So you've got, like, high variance of complexity, but you've got, like, pretty rigid conformality, whatever. People who conform to process and structure, and like there's a way things are done. And especially when you get into contracts, when you get into compliance or tech like IT security, there's always somebody waving a like you're going to go to jail, like right in the agreement officer's face or right in the AO's face. So imagine being like this poor soul whose job it is to acquire something. If you've ever gone and looked at like DoD 5000 and how they buy and like procurement in defense, it's unbelievably overwhelming. But doing that while somebody's shrieking at you that you're going to go to jail, and on the other side, they're shrieking at you that you need to move faster. And then the same thing, hey, you're the AO that owns risk acceptance of a piece of technology you are going to put on network. And everyone's screaming at you to go faster. But every process and policy you have tells you to move slow. Mm-hmm. So you've got that world. And then you go to startup world and it's like, well, if they didn't explicitly tell me no, I'm going to count that as a yes and I'm going to run with it. And right, they don't fit. There is I think a healthy disdain for like super robust fixed requirements out in tech just because the cycles are too fast, right? Like by the time I documented like page 32 of whatever freaking widget somebody wanted, I'm like 2 iterations forward. Whereas in DoD, we'll take years to just get a requirement down. And you're like, all right, well, like it has to say their name in the top left. And then when they click the button, it should blink. And there's a huge desynchronization just in like the relative pace and the feedback loops. And so then you put folks like that together. It's oil and water, not in a bad way. There is not strong empathy and awareness and understanding of the realities from which people came. It's like 2 time travelers or 2, space travelers like meet up from completely different planets and they're both like, you're an idiot. And they have no idea where the other came from or like what that reality was. So, I mean, that's where I see one from the empathy. The other one I see, and I try to take as much time as we can just talking to folks who are transitioning, because it's friggin' hard. Even with your skill bridges and all this, it's really hard. It's super scary, right? Like you've got to be super vulnerable for it. I think the same way I think startups don't understand how the government works, and there's a lot of times there's unrealistic expectations. I think the same is true on the other side, and I think you see it the most pronounced when folks are transitioning out of the government and they're like, yeah, I'm really good at strategy and I'm a leader. Like I should do strategy leadership at like your 50-person startup. And you're like, the hell job is that? Like, do we have a strategy role here? Like, and you make the joke, but like, you're creating value, you're protecting it, which translates even on the create value side, like you build things or you sell things. It's sort of like everything else is ancillary. Right? It's completely expendable. And as you grow, then you start folding in all of these like shared services and enablers and, stuff that's critical. But there's not this really good parity, and we don't do a really good job like making sure that the government understands it, despite all of the marketing and all of the innovation shops and all of the conferences and all of that. At its core, the department and the startup community don't understand each other. And they just are like the Simpsons grandfather, yelling at the sky. And I don't know how to fix that, but.
Well, that was the next question, man. You're supposed to, you got to land the plane, Tyler.
Yeah. All right. So how are we going to fix that? I mean, listen, like I forget who said it. How do we bring folks from industry in? And how do we do, we talk so much about like SkillBridge or DVP stuff going out. How do I bring people in?
Yeah.
What does space look like that allows for collaboration and empathy? And then the bigger question, which there's probably a cool technology solution for a part of this, is like, so let's say, no, you're DoD, I'm Startup Steve, and like we sit down, we go kumbaya, we now both understand each other. how do we scale that knowledge and transfer that knowledge so we can like diffuse it and democratize it across a network? That's the problem, right? Because you've got these pockets of goodness. You have all these breakthroughs, but it's completely dependent on like singular humans.
100%.
And thus not scalable. So there's like a knowledge capture, and I don't know what that looks like. The best way I keep coming back to is like there's some rotational fellowship, and we've got to find ways to create space for folks to come in and folks to come out and to be all right with that. There's so much goodness if we had folks coming and going. That would make us so much more resilient as just a country and as a national security enterprise. And it can't be the like, well, if you leave, you're not a believer anymore. You're not loyal to the mission. Like, that's bullshit. So that's my solution.
Amen. And look, to be fair to Tyler, you didn't know we were going to go down this path. This is a little bit of the shill here. I'm gonna do a shameless thing for a moment, which is say there are so many of these point-to-point networks that are freaking fantastic, right? Whether you're Code for America, U.S. Digital Corps, Defense Digital Service, you can go academia to government, government to tech, tech to government. Point to point, we have Tech Congress, right? There's any number of these programs that are meant to go point A to point B. What we lack right now is the connective tissue, the broader ecosystem that flows between those, that says, hey, for mission-driven people who want service to be at the core of their career, whether they're doing it in government or doing it in industry or starting their own company, we're going to build a unifying tapestry of resources, of people, of training and lifelong learning that's going to allow you to be successful no matter which station you happen to be at. That's exactly where I'm not going to announce anything on this show.
Let's go. I teed you up.
The idea of a national interest talent network, I think, is sorely overdue and absolutely something that's needed. So, amen to everything you had to say.
Yeah, man. Getting it, how we can scale that impact of the human layer and sort of the human condition of people who are passionate and connect that to mission and remove obfuscation or barriers from that is a 10x opportunity for the community.
And I think, there's one more kind of point I'll put on this, which is, you guys, Second Front, are doing this as a startup. Tyler, I tell when people ask me about Second Front, and I have never been on the inside, to be clear, one of the first things I ask, especially investors, is why is it that a prime didn't do what Second Front is doing? Why is it that somebody who had the, access to the networks or who owned and operated DoD infrastructure didn't do what you guys are doing? What's your answer to that? Because you guys have partnered with some of them.
Yeah.
What's your answer to that?
I mean, look, like it's a bigger question than, a quick sort of 30-second answer. I think one of it is, like, for better or worse, Congress and the department have conditioned primes to respond to certain things and kind of stay in their box. We yell at them all the time, and everyone likes to make them like a punching bag. But there's like a Pavlovian system there where, like, you can't yell at the dog for thinking it's getting food when you ring the bell, right? Like, it's not the dog's freaking fault. I'm not calling anyone a dog. But also, like, most of the like regulated industry disruptions you'll see is a somewhat orthogonal approach. So, right, like someone's going to come disrupt the shit out of me and I'm not going to see it because of where I'm sitting and like the vantage point on the problem, the solution, how it's going, the market that I have. So I think part of it is the lens or, the telescope you're looking through. Part of it is like the conditions you're operating in and where those incentives are and aren't. And part of that will also be like, what's the business built for? Right? Because there's a bunch of shit we can't do. So like if in 5 years people are like, oh, it was sharks with laser beams, like why didn't Sweatt and the 2F guys go figure that out? Like, bro, we're not a shark company. Right? Right? Like
I think we got to end now.
Freaking lasers.
Oh my God, dude! All right, we're gonna let you go here in a second, Tyler. I guess give us before we do, give us your source of optimism when you look at this thing right now. You've been in this space for a while.
Yeah.
Arguably it's never been hotter. But if you strip away the hype and you strip away the noise, what gives you hope and excitement right now for the industry?
Hope and excitement for the industry. This is going to sound odd, but I think it is a bunch of folks that are sort of right below the surface in the department, that are at operational units, that are in different agencies and staff, that are having a different caliber of conversation that I've ever seen had. And right, that's the glue. That's the invisible like success for all of this. It's not going to matter what like Undersecretary Bobby or Sally says, or POTUS or Congress, or half the time it's not going to matter what tech is built and shit. It's, hey, can we find ways to inject, to receive, to adopt, to scale, and to actually deploy in these programs in the government? That's that human layer in the government. And I'm seeing a tremendous amount of talent injection into there at the, their names aren't on the websites and, they don't have fancy titles. But if you ask me for optimism, it'd be there. Everything else is awesome, but that's the one where I'm like, all right, like, not dead yet.
Hell yeah. I love that. Well, folks, I think you can see why we love him. Tyler Sweatt, thank you for joining us, man.
Brother.
Give us the plug. If people want more Tyler, they want more Second Front, where can they go and learn more?
Come to secondfront.com. Get everything on there. Podcast, we try to make it pretty accessible. If you can tell, a little bit of levity. All quiet on the Second Front. And then super shameless plug, May 16th in DC, we've got our Offset Symposium. It's our annual flagship event where we bring together, legislators and, administrators and capital allocators and corporate leaders and operators. Try to put everybody in the room and have those open, authentic conversations and create space for engagement like we're talking about, to continue to build empathy and awareness and go get at some really, really hard problems. So you see it on the website. Would love to have everybody join us.
Love it. It's a hot ticket. Get yours before it's gone. Tyler, thanks for being here, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Dude, thanks, brother.